Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Bornay. I'm a deacon in the Diocese of Baton Rouge and the Communications Secretary for the Diocese. In your packets, you have 3 documents. One document is a news release. Embedded in that document is the message that Bishop Duca will deliver in just a moment. It is actually printed in that document. You also have a list of the clergy, and you have frequently asked questions. What we'd like to do is have the bishop come up, make his statement, and then we will entertain your questions. If you will, I would recognize you, and you would identify yourself and your media outlet, and then you could have the Q&A period, okay? Thank you very much. Bishop Duca.
Thank you for coming today. My opening remarks are really about trying to maybe put some context into this. The frequently asked questions answer a lot of the practical questions, but I'll, of course, be glad to answer any questions you have after these few remarks. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, today I have the sad and profoundly humbling task of publishing the names of all priests, and in our case, a bishop and 1 seminarian, against whom there are credible allegations of sexual abuse of minors and/or vulnerable adults in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. This list is based on the review of all 1,033 clergy personnel files of the Diocese of Baton Rouge from its formation in 1961 to the present. When I committed myself in the diocese to this task soon after my arrival, my first concern was, and has been, for the persons victimized by this abuse, who have often felt betrayed and unsupported by the Church. It has been my hope that this will be an important step that will help those men and women whose lives have been so deeply violated. I've also hoped that this will give a sense of the scope of the allegations in this diocese. My prayer is that this list will be a sign of a new level of transparency and openness in the way we respond to allegations of abuse and care for the victims. Some have asked why we must do this. As I said in my Sunday letter, the fact that this wound will not heal tells us that we must continue to bring everything into the light. This is not easy. I have listened to some victims share their stories, and there are no words to express the depth of sadness and shame that was experienced in our church, or that we should experience in our church, and that this is a part of our history. It's hard to lay this list out for all to see, but real renewal and healing cannot take place until we acknowledge the truths of the past. This list reflects the lives of real people and a path of pain and suffering that affects most deeply the persons who are victims of abuse, but also their friends and family that journey with them, and even innocent family members of the priest who are accused. Each name represents a unique case. Some only had one victim. Others' abuse gouged a wide path of pain in the lives of many victims. In some cases, the victims were male, and in others, female. But there is one thing most importantly, and that is, most importantly, that they all have in common, that they all have been credibly accused of sexual abuse of a minor or minors. I know that there may be some names that are a surprise and some revelations that will cause pain in extended families and friends. I deeply regret this. It is my hope that all those friends and family affected by this list will be treated with the respect they deserve. In the process of creating the list of names, I have heard from some, and even felt this myself in the beginning, that once this is done, we can move beyond the Christ mode and get back to normal. But I've come to see quite clearly that in this thinking there is already a return to an old standard to once again get this done and then sweep it under the carpet. This list is not the end, but an attempt to open the door on sexual abuse that none of us want to open. In every case of abuse on this list, I am sure that the victim was told, don't tell anyone. They heard this from their abuser, but also from the church, sometimes overtly. Okay, we'll take care of Father, you just keep this a secret. Or they felt an unspoken, institutionally expressed rule of the church that you are just not supposed to talk about these things. Unfortunately, to keep the status quo, the victims of abuse must bear the pain for others' peace of mind and must do this alone. My hope is that this list is a concrete sign that we do want to talk about this. Hopefully, a victim of abuse will see a name on this list and say, "That's me," and this will encourage them or give them the courage to go to a trusted friend, counselor, family member, or even if they want to come talk to me and share their story so they might no longer bear the pain alone. We must be willing to share their pain, admit our part in the tragedy, so that we can ease their burden and be, for the victims of sexual abuse, a support and not a barrier to the path of healing. So this list is not the final piece of dealing with this, but rather I see it as the beginning in a foundational change in the church's way of acting that will renew all the programs we have in place to protect our children with a focus on healing the victims of abuse rather than the protection of the status quo. I wanted to give that context because one of the things that I have experienced as I've gone through this is the reality that besides all, that I think we've thrown up a lot of programs, but I think what I'm realizing, and I think many bishops are realizing too, is that you can throw up a bunch of programs, but if you still keep the fundamental kind of attitude of trying to protect, of trying to keep hidden, even the most progressive programs can be turned to a wrong intention. So I'm really hoping that we begin to change the way we do things as a whole in the church, and one of that is to be more open and more vulnerable in dealing with those, especially who suffer from abuse, but hopefully in other areas as well. But those are my opening remarks. Oh, one last thing I wanted to say, and I didn't put it in this list. It's said in this frequently asked questions, but we do see this as a dynamic list. That is, we will continue to update it as new information comes in. We will continue to add names if they arise in the future or if new information comes forward.